So today we're going to dissect the hinge to squat movement. This is something that I came up with to teach people how to find their squat stance and their depth in their squat. Now this is typically something that is difficult for a lot of students because you have a couple factors at play here. You have ankle mobility issues. So if you've had an ankle issue or your ankles are tight, it's going to restrict you from squatting. You also have knee issues. So if you've had a knee surgery or any pain in the knee or your discomfort, that's going to limit your range of motion as well. So here's the thing though, we can attempt to get into the squat position successfully by accessing it through the kettlebell hinge or the hinge position. So for example, when I'm doing a hinge, I'm bypassing the ankle mobility issues and the knees. So most people can get into that position successfully, right? Everybody's gonna have a different degree. Your hinge may be high, your hinge may be low, it doesn't matter. Right now, we're just working on that hinge position. And eventually, we're gonna take that hinge position, wherever it may be, and then we're gonna bring it into the squat position. And this is gonna allow us to do so because we're bypassing all of the issues that you'd commonly see, which is the ankle and the knee, typically. So some students have learned the goblet squat, which is an excellent way to teach the squat. And the goblet squat starts from the bottom and works its way back up again. Others will teach the squat from the top down. That's from the standing position going into the squat position from there. Now, both have their negatives, both have their positives, right? But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to access it from the middle. So we're not going from the top down, we're not going from the bottom up, we're going from the hinge position. So take a look at this, for example. You're going into your hinge. Now everybody's hinge is going to be a little bit different to start. Like I said, you might be a little higher, you might be a little bit lower. What main point of this is we're going to transition from the hinge to the squat. So there will need to be adjustments made with the feet, whether it's closer, wider, toe out, toe in. Everybody's going to have a different type of squat and setup, and that is okay. It's authentic to you. So for example, let me take you through a couple scenarios here. You may have someone that starts with their feet straight and they go into their hinge, and then from the hinge position, all I'm gonna ask is that from here, from your deepest hinge position, you're gonna drop your butt as deep as you can, and then you're gonna stand from there. So let me do it from the side. Hinge, drop, stand. Now let me give you a version of a higher hip which you may see. High hip, drop, stand. It doesn't matter where your hip position starts. All that matters is that you're finding your hinge position first, and then you're transitioning into that squat. So really all I'm doing is dropping my hips from that hinge position. Now, here's where the adjustments need to be made. It's not just good enough to establish the hinge, because we have to figure out, okay, where is your most comfortable stance for your squat? And because everybody's built differently, you may have someone that wants to go a little wider. They might want to go a little bit narrower, right? So let's say we have an example of someone who's doing this with their toes are perfectly straight and they're a very high hip hinge. This is something you commonly see, especially if you're learning kettlebells, you may be learning that high hip position. So let's take it from the high hip position with the toes straight. So if someone's doing that, they might say, okay, I feel like I need to go a little wider. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna allow that to go a little bit wider. You can still keep your toes straight, that's fine. They're gonna go into their hinge, and now they're gonna find that because they went wider, they're able to access that squat a little bit better. That's where we're going with this. So you need to make adjustments. Others may say, hey, I feel like I need to toe out a little bit more. So then toe out, go back to your hinge again, go into your squat, and then come up. So wherever that is, wherever that foot placement is, that's what we're determining here through the hinge position. So you'll have to play around with it yourself and with your clients and ask questions. How does it feel? Do you feel like you need to go narrower? Do you feel like you need to go a wider stance? Do you feel like you need to keep your toes straight? Or do you feel like you need to open your stance, your toes a little bit? There's no right or wrong. It's what works for you, your type of squat, okay? Now, from that position, once we've figured out what that comfortable stance is, we're then going to figure out what's a comfortable depth position. So how deep do you go? Ideally, I like to see the hips a little bit below the knee, because if I can get someone to get into that position, then I know now their glutes are kicking in and they're not just using all knee. So for example, if I'm cueing this, I'm gonna have them go here. I'm gonna tell them to go as deep as they possibly can. And if I can get them to this position where their hips are a little below the knees and come up from there, excellent. That's my goal. So this is gonna be something that you're gonna work towards, and believe it or not, this whole process can take less than a minute. You're gonna be able to teach somebody in less than a minute how to squat from the hinge position. Now let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to where we were teaching the squat from the top down, which a lot of instructors do. Well, when you go from the top down, you have all these other factors now that you have to deal with. Number one, you have to figure out ankle mobility issues, knee issues, possibly low back issues. All of these come into play. The other thing that comes into play is this, and you've probably have seen this before. When people start their squat, they tend to tilt their pelvis first, and then they push their hips back into the squat. Well, guess what? You don't have to deal with that anymore. So all these factors are now gone. We don't have to. We're streamlining the process. It's much easier now, because all we're doing now is having you go into your hinge first. You've already established this center part and your spine, and nothing changes except dropping the butt. That's it. It's that simple. Keep things simple and you'll go a long way. So try this progression with yourself, allow the adjustments to be made, and then you'll see how quickly you can squat.